Good morning and welcome to today's webinar. This is Lutheran Service Builder Complete Overview. This is an introductory training webinar. My name is Peter Frank and I am the Senior Marketing Manager at Concordia Publishing House. I've been with the publishing house for almost 10 years now, and I've been working in our software area for about 5. Lutheran Service Builder is a fairly recent addition to my group. My focus has been with Concordia Technology Solutions and our church administration software, but as we are gearing up for a new launch of Lutheran Service Builder, I was brought into our team, and it's been a great addition. I've really enjoyed getting to know it more and to be able to share information with others like those of you who are attending today. So I would not consider myself an expert on Lutheran Service Builder, only because as I think about those who are using it, we probably have some users who have built over 500 services using Lutheran Service Builder. So compared to that, I think my skill level probably pales in comparison, but I do know quite a bit, and I hope to share that knowledge with you today. So before we begin, a few housekeeping items. First off, I'm planning 50 minutes for presentation. And that will probably be not enough time because there's so much to cover, but I'm going to do my best to stick with that. My plan is for the final 10 minutes to be reserved for questions and answers. Now, if we don't have enough questions to fill that time, that's okay, and I'll kind of monitor that as we go. So I do ask that you ask questions throughout. There's a good chance that the question you ask will be answered shortly thereafter based on the outline of the presentation. I don't really plan on stopping to ask or answer those questions as we go, although I do glance over from time to time, and if there's something that I can answer at that time, I will. But please do ask questions, if not for the purpose of getting the answer right then, just to get it off the top of your head. I'm going to adjust my mic a little bit. Oh, sorry about that. All right. This will be recorded, and the recording will be shared. So if you need to step away for a second, you want to review it after the fact, you'll be able to see this later on, hopefully later on today, or if you want to share it with somebody else at your congregation, you'll be able to do that as well. A short background on who we are. If you are unfamiliar with Concordia Publishing House, we are the publishing arm of the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod, and we've been doing this since 1869. And while many things have changed in the almost 150 years we've been operating, the one thing has stayed the same, and that is that we provide resources to help people share the gospel. And that has been consistent since the very beginning of the publishing house, and that will continue to be true for the rest of our future. So a little bit about Lutheran Service Builder. Lutheran Service Builder is a PC-based software that allows churches to quickly and easily plan services, create custom service folders, export them to presentations, and also conform with copyright requirements. We're going to talk about all that today. Lutheran Service Builder was actually started as an idea during a seminary class assignment, and it was developed between 2004 and 2006 by a seminarian named Bob Lale. And you can watch the video where Bob describes his process of creating Lutheran Service Builder. We've actually got 2 videos now at lutheranservicebuilder.com. It's really a fascinating story and helps understand kind of the heart behind Service Builder and why it was created. We see this as more than just a software. It's truly a ministry tool. So we released it shortly after the release of Lutheran Service Book in 2006, and we have about half of the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod using Lutheran Service Builder right now, and that's a fantastic adoption rate. What that also means is that there's always people who have new ideas on how to improve it, and so that's where we're at right now. Is we are presently updating Lutheran Service Builder to become web-based, and we'll talk about that a little bit at the end as we go. And if I forget to mention it and show you kind of a very brief preview of where we're headed, please be sure to hold me accountable, put a note in the chat. So the plan is to release that in early 2018. Later on this year, at the end of the summer, we are planning on beginning beta testing, field testing for that. We've got a large list of people signed up for that. We're going to roll it out slowly to our field testers. and as we go through the final months of 2017 for getting ready for a release in the beginning of next year. So we're releasing it in early 2018, knowing that that is can be kind of a busy time for churches, but that way it helps us to continue to get feedback even after it's released and make it better. We know most people tend to adopt new software in the summer months where it's a bit slower. So, but if you're one of the eager ones who are ready to get started with that, early 2018 is when you can begin. So a few assumptions about you who have are attending this webinar. So first, I'm assuming that you're new to Lutheran Service Builder. And I say this because it is an introductory training. And so even if your church has used it for a while, you yourself may be new to Lutheran Service Builder, or it's possible that you may not be using it at all. And I'm going to ask that question in just a moment. Now, if you have used Lutheran Service Builder, I'm assuming that you've had informal training at best. And I'm assuming that because we haven't released much training in the last 8 years or so. The training webinars that I led in February are the most training that we've offered in a while, and that's going to end. We're going to continue to offer more and more training opportunities as we go. I'm also assuming you're eager to get more out of Builder. If not, you wouldn't have dedicated an hour of your Tuesday morning to spend time with me. So I think that's a pretty safe assumption. And on another safe assumption, I'm assuming you're very busy, and I do understand that in the church office, it never slows down. So I thank you for taking time out of your day. If you find that this is not what you're looking for, if this is not valuable to you, don't worry, you're not going to hurt my feelings if you have to step out and do something else, because what you're doing in the church office is far more important than anything software does. Software is simply a tool that helps you share the gospel, and that's how we view software. That's how I know you view software. And so if this is not helpful to you, go ahead and focus on the things that are more important. Before I begin, I do ask that you tell me a little bit about yourself. And so I've got 2 polls for you here. And it helps me get a good idea of who I'm speaking to. So we're going to start with the first one, which is please select the option that most closely describes your primary role at church. And I've got a few things in there that are kind of our most common ones that we get. But then I also put other as an option in case I didn't catch everybody who's there. So I'm going to let this go for another few seconds or so. We've got a pretty good completion rate already. Thank you for doing that. And it looks like we are almost evenly split between ordained pastors and administrators, with a smaller percentage being church musicians and then a smaller percentage being others. So thank you very much for voting on that. That's good to know. I'm going to go ahead and close that poll, and we're going to go to the next one, which is, does your church use Lutheran Service Builder? So this will help me understand if I'm talking to current customers, potential customers, or both. I know that we're probably going to have a mixture, and as we go, it looks like a little bit over half are currently using this, and so this will be more of a training focus. We've got some who are not using it, and so I hope that you'll get a good overview of what the software can do. We've got some who used to use it and some who are not sure, so that makes sense. I figured that we'd have some of those as well. So great, fantastic. Thank you very much for that. All right, we are going to get going a little bit quicker here because I don't want to spend too much time on this front matter. So our goals for today: learn the core features of Lutheran Service Builder by planning a Sunday service. We'll export a simple service folder that can be printed and used for Sunday service, and be able to modify that exported service either for print or presentation to meet your individual congregation's needs. And that's what I've seen as I've talked with more and more churches who are using Builders, that most are not using every aspect of it, and there's still a number of customizations that occur after the service has been exported, and that's just fine. We understand that. That's part of the goal of the software, is to be flexible enough to give you exactly what you need, knowing that every church is going to be different. The outline, just very briefly, we're going to plan a Sunday service. We'll go through the propers and what that means. We'll look at the different parts of liturgy and how to make those selections. We'll look at a few advanced search techniques. I should have added an S there. We'll focus on preparing the service for print or presentation. And lastly, we'll review some of the things around copyright management. And that is a very important part and is often overlooked. And so I want to draw some attention to that. So let's go ahead and get started. So I'm going to switch over to Lutheran Service Builder. And this, once you've opened it and installed it, you can download a trial from our website if you haven't already used that. This will be the first screen that you get to. And it's pretty large on my screen. It actually fills the window. Now I hope that some of the other views won't be as large, and so I'm going to do my best to make sure that it's visible. If you have any problems seeing it or at least getting the general idea of what I'm doing, let me know. There's a few things I can do. I don't know if it'll be a much better experience. It could be worse, so that's why I haven't started with that. But so on here, you'll see that there's three main areas to begin: calendar, statistics, and my worship resources. Statistics and my worship resources are a little bit more under the advanced side, and so we're not going to get into that today. If you'd like to learn more about those, the recorded webinars we have on our website would be very helpful. But really we're going to focus on calendar. And so when we click on calendar, it gives you an actual calendar. And you can see that here we've jumped ahead to April. In March, you can see that there's less going on. That's because we've got Holy Week coming up here. And it shows the special occasions in the church year on this calendar. Now, for today's purposes, we're only going to be focused on Lent 5, the fifth week of Lent, for this upcoming Sunday. Now, this is using the 3-year lectionary. If you are using the 1-year lectionary, you can go up into Edit and go to Preferences, and then click over to Service Schedule. Sorry, my mistake is click under Locations, and this is where you would change from 3-year to 1-year lectionary. Now this is a one-time setup. Most congregations don't go back and forth between these two lectionaries, so once you get that set up, you won't have to worry about changing that in the future. Service Schedule is a place where you can set some of your defaults, set your service times, and that helps provide a little bit of additional information. So if you have different services for different times, or if you change it up a little bit based on the focus of those services, this is where you can set those up to be different. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and hit cancel. We're going to stick with the 3-year right now. To begin planning a service, you pick the date that you want the service to occur. And you can either click on the date itself or click on the special occasion. Either way is just fine, and it's going to default to the feast, festival, or occasion for that day, and you can change it. And in some cases there's going to be more than one. Like on Easter Sunday, you'll see we've got Easter sunrise, day, and evening. But for today, we're looking at the 5th Sunday in Lent. Now from here, if you do have a special service like a wedding or a funeral, you can add those on here, and those are other. You can also choose none and kind of build it from scratch too. Whoops, I went too quickly there. So we're going to choose the 5th Sunday in Lent. We're going to pick our service times that we've already set up. And our next step is to plan the service. And once you click Plan the Service, it allows you to choose an order of service. And this is all coming directly from the Lutheran Service book. You can see there that there are 5 settings of the divine service. And if you want to know more about those, I've covered that in a bit more detail in the recorded training webinars that we have up there, but we also have a few recordings of training on Lutheran Service book, and Peter Reske, who is our editor of the Lutheran Service book, goes into greater detail with that. But to preview them, you can click on each one of those services and zoom or click in and see the differences as you go. Divine Service setting 5, the Martin Luther service, that setting is probably the least commonly used, although going into this year with the 500th anniversary of the Reformation, it will be much more commonly used. You also have the daily offices like Matins or Vespers or morning and evening prayer coming from Lutheran worship. Compline is in there as well. The service of prayer and preaching is a new service, new in Lutheran Service Book. Lutheran Service Book is now 10 years old, so it's not brand new, but this is for especially relevant for services where you are not celebrating with the Lord's Supper. So we're going to focus on Divine Service Setting 1 today, and we're going to click OK. And now that takes us into this planning view. And so it gives us all the elements of worship, but there's some work that needs to be done. And this is the core benefit of Lutheran Service Builder right here, is to be able to plan your order of service, see what options you have, and kind of build out this service folder. So we're going to walk through this, not in great detail, but going through and setting up everything that we need. So you see as we go down, there's lots of different things going on here. At the beginning, you see is the service of confession absolution, moves into the service of the word, and finally service of the sacrament. And you can collapse those if it makes it easier to see. In this case, we're going to start with confession absolution. And the first selection here is the hymn of invocation. Now, based on the propers of the day, you will see some different things here. So, for example, the hymn of the day, which could be defined as a proper. I know Peter Reske, our general editor, defines that as a proper, and it goes along with the church year. Now, some will use the hymn of the day as the hymn of invocation. Maybe you call it the opening hymn, the entrance hymn. That is able to be changed. The proper name is hymn of invocation, and the proper place for hymn of the day is before the sermon. So we're going to go below that and look at hymns for the readings, and you can see that's based on the propers of the day as well. Now, if you want a quick view of the propers for any given day in the church year, what I would suggest, you can go through here and go to Service of the Word and go to the different readings and see that. You can go and see like the gradual. I would suggest going to lutherancalendar.org, and I'll show you what that looks like. If you go to lutherancalendar.org, it gives you this same kind of calendar view and lists the days of the church year in there. And when you click on it, let's go here to April 2nd. Go to Lent 5. You can see here are the readings, the psalm. As you go down, you'll also see then the introit, the collect, the gradual, and the verse. Now, these are the core propers for the day. We don't have the hymn of the day in here because of copyright reasons. But you can see all of this as you go through and have a quick glance. This is also very handy on your mobile device. It adjusts very nicely. Excuse me. And then you also have the option to switch the lectionary and go through that, as it will change depending on whether you're using the 1 year or the 3 year. And so when you switch, then you can click on that date and see the differences. So a nice little quick view. This is free. You can go access this right now, and I think it's a really great resource. I think that I'm a little biased because it's my team that put that together, but that's okay. All right, so we're going to go back in here. I think I'll leave Service of the Word expanded for now. So we're going to pick a hymn of invocation. You can choose it from the readings or other suggested hymns. And I am not an expert with hymnody, so I can't look at these and just say which one would be really good for the entrance. So I do apologize if it's not correct, but we're going to pick Christ, the Life of All the Living. And you can preview that here. You can see the different verses. You can see it with the melody in place. When you click on the Info tab, there's a lot of different things there. You can see the related scripture. And this is what, based on the scripture verses here, is why it might be suggested for the readings. You can also add notes to this, and this is notes attached to the hymn, not related to the day. So, for example, if you use this one time and you want to and you find out that it didn't go really well, that the congregation had trouble singing it, you could put that note in there and say, on this date, the congregation had trouble singing, and then maybe a follow-up note for yourself, like maybe introduce it in a different way next time, or play it in with a different prelude. Anything for yourself that could be helpful, you can choose that. So, and that'll stay with that hymn later on. All right, so we're going to choose that, and we'll just double-click that. And whoops, as we go here, so we have chosen, I'm clicking out of that as well. I'm not sure why there we go. When I double click it now, it says that 420 Christ the Life of All the Living has been selected. And we'll continue on. Not sure why that has not gone away. So that's okay. One thing I forgot to mention, I don't know if it'll play for you, but we do have a preview, a MIDI file where you can click on this and it'll tell you or give you an example of what the melody is like. So if you are more of an auditory learner, that might help kind of jog your memory on what that is. Okay, so we're going to go down, and then you've got some rubrics. Stand, the sign of the cross may be made. Then we get into invocation, and there's really only one option for you there. As we get into the exhortation, we've got one that's defined for that setting, although if you want to switch to a different settings option, you can, but we're going to stick with the default for today. Some more rubrics, then confession of sin, and again, there's a default as well as other options based on other services. Absolution or declaration of grace, that is based on whether or not you have an ordained minister serving or an assistant minister. This past Saturday, I served as elder, and our vicar led the service. We were not celebrating the Lord's Supper, and so he was by himself, and so he went with the declaration of grace, as is appropriate for him to declare, as opposed to absolution, which would only be by an ordained minister. So we're going to select the absolution defined for this, the default right there, and that's kind of the good and proper way of going, is by going with the default, although Lutheran Service Builder does make it easy for you to select other options if you'd so prefer. Moving down into the service of the word, then you have the option to choose either the introit, a psalm, or an entrance hymn. And there's a lot of different reasons why you might select one of these over the other, but we're going to start with just the introit, and this is a proper for the 5th Sunday in Lent, and so we'll choose that here. All right, as we go down, then is the Kyrie, and you have some different options for the Kyrie as you go through. Some are within the hymnal themselves as hymns, others are part of other settings, but we're going to pick the default Kyrie for today. Now we move into the hymn of praise, and you can select either Gloria in Excelsis or This is the Feast. Now, in this case, we are in Lent, and this is usually omitted during the season of Lent. And so if you want to remove that, you can just right-click and delete it, and just remove that from the service. There we go. Salutation and collect of the day, that also is a proper, and so you can see that there. Old Testament reading is now defined. This is the default Old Testament reading. And then we can see here that you have the option for the psalm or the gradual. Again, the gradual is a proper, so there's a default option selected there. So we're going to go with that for today. Alleluia in the verse. Now you see here common Alleluia in the verse, and you've got that indicator that says, once again, that this is generally omitted, usually omitted during the season of Lent, but we do have the option for the verse for Lent. And so we're going to choose that. Now, if you're unfamiliar with why that's happening, during the season of Lent, the Alleluia, the word Alleluia is removed, and therefore in the different parts of service where Alleluia is said, such as the Alleluia in verse, it's traditional to remove that during that time, and that's because it's a somber season. And so we will select the verse for Lent, move on to the gospel lesson, and we've got the default. Now you've got some different options there in terms of selected text. So if you want a lesser amount, you can choose that, and there's selected readings in there as well for you. But we'll go with the first one that's there. Now we move on to the hymn of the day, and that's where it is selected here, and we'll double click it to select it, and it's my song is Love Unknown. Moving on, we have the sermon and then the creed, which traditionally when communion is served, the Nicene Creed is spoken, and that is the default, although the Apostles' Creed can be used and is shown there. Athanasian Creed is also in there, although that's not nearly as common during the season of Lent. Typically that is done on Trinity Sunday. So we're going to go with the Nicene Creed. Now, prayer of the church follows the creed. Now, this is where you could write your own, and you can see there as you write your own, you get my worship resources showing up there. Now, the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod does publish weekly prayers of the church, and to access that, if you go to lutheranservicebuilder.com and you go down to our downloads, you can see the Let Us Pray files. And if they're different for 1 year or 3 year, we do put those different buttons in there. Sometimes those are going to be the exact same and point to the same file, but we do try to make it easy to help you distinguish. You can download the 3 year, and when you click on it, it'll download to a zip file. And when you open that up, you can see April 2nd, 2017, Series A. That's tied into the lectionary. We will open that up, and nothing seems to happen except you'll see, actually, yeah, you should be able to see down here, Lutheran Service Builder is now flashing. And you can see now that April 2nd, 2017 is available. And when you select that, you can see the prayers of the church, or prayers of the church listed there. So now we have added that in, and we can also drag and drop it to make sure that it goes in place. And we are ready to go. Now you can also edit these from in here if you'd like. You can also write your own, and that goes into my worship resources. So we're not going to get into that too much here. We'll continue down the service, and I apologize if I'm going a little quickly. There's a lot to cover here. I want to make sure to get it all. So that is why I'm going that quickly. One thing before I forget, let me go back to the downloads page. You can always go and access this. We do plan it out a number of weeks in advance. As we receive this from Synod, we do update our website. Sometimes we get a little bit closer to running out, although you don't generally see too many churches planning too far in advance with the prayers. But if you'd like, you can receive notification, and you can enter your email in here, and we will notify you when the latest have been updated. So if you want to download them all at once, you can get that email, go download them, and then you're all set until the next group comes out. So that is all that I need to go into with that. Let's go back to Lutheran Service Builder. Oops. Okay, so sorry about that. Now we go into offering, which is just a caption. We go into offertory, and we go to suggestions. And again, there is a default, although you can choose similar. And again, this shows you either a hymn or offertories from other divine service settings. We're going to go with the default as well. That's what we're going with in most cases today. Now moving on to the service of the sacrament. You'll have the preface that is included there. We'll choose the default. The proper preface, which is, again, a proper, chosen for the 5th Sunday in Lent. We'll make it easy by putting that in the name, proper preface. You could also do the abbreviated version, which is just for printing purposes. You see here that this writes everything out, whereas the proper preface abbreviated shows the ellipses in there. And then that saves some space in your service folder. Also gives you some flexibility if you want to go outside the norm but don't have it ready yet. So we'll go with the full proper preface for right now. The Sanctus, again, we'll select the default. Prayer of Thanksgiving, and then the words of the Lord is next. Now we have left column and right column, which seems a little bit odd to call it that. That is based on Lutheran Service Book because there are 2 options. If you go with the left column, it puts the words of the Lord first, the proclamation of Christ, and then finally the Lord's Prayer, whereas the right column, which is the right column in the Lutheran Service Book, puts just the Lord's Prayer and then the words of the Lord. And that's my preference, leaving the words of the Lord as the last. And so we're going to go with that today. We have the Pax Domini, follow that up, and then the Agnus Dei. And you can select the default there. Again, there's some similar options. And then the distribution. And there are some rubrics here, which may or may not be included. So you have here this rubric that says the pastors and those who assist him receive the body and blood of Christ first, and then distribute them to those who come receive, saying, and it gives the distribution words there, and then also the dismissal. Now, I know many churches exclude that because while it is describing what's going on during the service, it might be a helpful training tool. It's not absolutely necessary because it doesn't evoke a response from the congregation. And so that's your call whether or not you leave it in. We're going to leave that in here today just to show where that'll export. Finally, it provides two options for distribution hymns, and again, you've got that same list. So if you haven't used the hymn of the day, this would be a great place to use it. You could also choose other hymns here based on the readings. Now, this is a time where I'm going to show search, because while this gives you suggestions, you may have an idea for a hymn that you that is not listed here as one of those suggestions. So one way to do it, I'm going to skip a tab and go to Browse. And what Browse does is it gives you the entire listing of the Lutheran Service Book. And as you go down, you can see those categories and you can see those hymns. Now, a little bonus feature here, there are 20 hymns included in Lutheran Service Builder that are not included in Lutheran Service Book. And those are the ones with the later numbers. You'll see that as you go in here. That like within, let me scroll up a little bit, there's a number of them as we go. But like within here, under Trust, you can see it follows numerically until you get to the last one, which is 976, Give Me Jesus. There's a number of these. They might be a little bit more on the new side, more contemporary if you use that word. That depends really on the type of music that you play with it. Like here, 975, Blessed Be the Tie That Binds. So I know that's not really a new hymn per se. In fact, if we look at the info, you can see that the text came from 1740. So yeah, certainly not new. Those are hymns that were just not included in the hymnal due to space, but were chosen as potential hymns. And this gives us the option to include it in there. So think of that as just like the special features on a DVD that you would get. You get a little bit extra with Lutheran Service Builder. So you can also search for hymns here, and there's a number of different ways that you can search. This goes into some of our advanced search techniques. So if you wanted to search for, let's say, Amazing Grace, and you search for that, and it'll come up here with anything that has Amazing Grace in it. Now it shows the hymns by number, which is why Amazing Grace, the hymn with that title, shows up last. When you hover over it, you'll see why this was selected. You can also sort by relevance, and then you see Amazing Grace comes up first that way. You could also sort alphabetically, and then Amazing Grace comes in second. So just a little helpful information there. Now you could search for everything, and it's still only showing hymns, but if you want to show like Grace, that's going to be a lot. So when you type in Grace, you've got all of these different things that show up, including scripture verses, including collects. I saw those down here. So that is a lot. Now, you can select some modifiers here by just saying, okay, only show me scripture that talks about grace. And that shows you all this. And this is a great search for finding scripture readings as well, if you were going based on a theme. And while we, again, recommend the propers, sometimes there's reasons, especially at like funerals, you may have a specific reading that you want to apply there. Now, if you go over here, you can see some, hover over this little magnifying glass, you can see some additional search tips. So if you want to use an exact phrase, you can use quotes. So before, when we did Amazing Grace, if we type that in quotes, then what comes up, and we'll go to everything to show it, then only two things come up. And Amazing Grace, of course, that hymn, as well as Not Unto Us, because within that hymn, that phrase is sung. Now you've got a few other options there. We won't review all of them, but you could do Bible references. You can use the modifier or to choose one of multiple options. Oops, you have to keep it hovered over there. You could use hyphens to find a range of numbers, which when I first learned that, I thought, well, why would anybody use a range? Well, many people have the hymnal almost memorized. They've used it so much, and so rather than going over here, they find it easier to say, you know, I know Advent hymns are between 331 and 357, or maybe they knew that you know, a certain hymn was in the 540s, and so they want to look here and say, all right, well, I know it's between 540 and 549, so I'm going to search for that and see what shows up. And I'll search by number, and you can see there's the collects and the hymns separately. You could also then just show hymns, and it'll show that range. So that's one way to do that. This also looks at the text attribution. So apparently Gregory wrote this and wrote the text and lived in 540. So that's why that's showing up. All right, a lot of stuff there. I could go in more detail. One last thing to show you, that if you click this plus button here, it takes you to the advanced search, which gives you all sorts of different options and really leads you through how to find exactly what you're looking for. And you'll notice that there are and modifiers on the right that show those different sections. Within those sections, there's some or modifiers. All of this could be done by typing in the search with those correct modifiers, but this kind of removes the guesswork and shows you all the options that you have available. Really powerful stuff here. And I know many people use Lutheran Service Builder just for its search functionality, which it definitely has, and you can see that right there. So that's the search. We're not going to get any more in that. We do that more in our detailed training webinars, but I think that's more than enough information to get you started, at least. Okay, so you'll see here under distribution of hymn, that gives you, because we chose Blessed be the tie that binds, you get another little modifier note there that says this is electronic only. So that's good information to know that if you choose this hymn, people won't be able to pick up the hymnal and sing it from there. All right, the last couple things we've got on here. We've got the post-communion canticle, which is recommending Thank the Lord. You could also do the Nunc Dimittis, and when you go to suggestions, you can see what those are. And if you're not familiar with them, it gives you those details. You could also see it with the melody. All right, and then this says that Thank the Lord is often removed during Lent, so we're going to go with Nunc Dimittis. And this really guides you through this process to make sure that you're doing what is appropriate. So if you're new to the church, if you're new to the Lutheran Church and have done things differently before, this is a good way to learn. Lastly, on the benediction, you've got some different options here. Depending on what your preference is, you'll see that the default is always what's most appropriate for this time of the church year and this service setting. So we're going to go with the default. Now, that took me a lot longer than it'll probably take you because I was describing it as it went. And I still don't understand why that hasn't been removed. That must be a little bit of a bug. We're continually finding little things like that. So we're at 40 minutes now. We got a lot more to cover. I'm going to move into the bulletin view. So when I click on the second tab up here, it's going to take everything that I've already planned out and now put it into a bulletin view. And we've got this wonderful background that says, hey, there are some copyrighted materials in here. Just be aware of that. That's good to know. I'm just going to scroll down. You can see there is our hymn. Then as we go through, it lists out the things that we've already chosen there. All of the appropriate propers are in place. You'll also notice that it's kind of condensed into a skinny column. Well, this is preparing your worship folder for print. And right now, the print settings that we have require smaller columns. As you go through, you can see all of that. Now, when you click on Layout here up at the top right, that's saying, all right, let's plan how this will actually, the end result. What's this being printed on? Well, right now we've got letter folded, which is about the skinniest that you can get. So at 8.5, 11 gets folded down to 8.5 by 5.5. That's a small amount of space. But I know many people use legal folded. Well, that gives you a little bit more space, an extra 1.5 inches actually, because you're going to, from 11 to 14. So it's 8.5 by 7 now. And you can choose folded. When you click OK, that expands. Now, in some cases, it doesn't do too much, but as you get into this text down here, that's a little bit more comfortable reading there. It's not quite as skinny. All right, so that's one way of doing it. You can also do custom sizes there. So if you have like a trifold, you could plug those dimensions in as well. Now, as we go through here, you have the option to change some things. So like here, you've got copy, title, subcaption. So this is probably not a great example, but if you wanted to say where this confession and absolution came from, you could say like Divine Service 1, setting 1, or Divine Service, I forget what, I think we went 1 and 1 here. You could put that in there, and then when you click there, you could say, actually the subcaption's not showing up for that. We'll look at a different example of subcaption because it's not usually common to put under a heading a subcaption. Let's look at him actually, because that's kind of neat. When you click here, you can see that it's got just the text listed. Now you can click over here and select melody, and now you can print the melody with there. You could choose which stanzas, so maybe you aren't doing the extra stanzas and you're just doing the first 4. You could also even go in and say, I just want to do stanzas 1, 3, and 4. And it'll remove that and show it in there as well. And then the subcaption up into the top right will also tell you which stanzas are being chosen. And you can do the same with the text. So you've got those different options here. And as you go down, there's some default, you've got a default formatting for that. So like if you want to do title only, it'll do the default for all of that. You'll see as you go down, it's just the title. If you want to do text only or hymn list, it'll do that from a kind of a global perspective and go through there. And you can create your own service formats. We're just going to go with the default for right now. It's going to change this back and say, well, we want to show the melody today. And as you go down, you can see other things. So like if this is a rubric you don't want included, or if you want to change when you click, oops, not subcaption, when you click on title, sorry, copy. Oh, actually, that, my mistake. Rubrics are edited under here on the planning side because they are part of the service. But you could change those things. If you're adding custom elements, you can change as you go. You could also, so here with the introit, you could remove the pointing or include the pointing. And you could choose which psalm tone you want. If you want to go with the D, you could choose that in there. So as you go through, the different choices are available. And if you want to change the actual copy of this, you go back to that planning stage and edit there. And that gets a little bit more complex, and we're already running short on time. So what I want to show next is what happens when you save this. So we're going to click Save As, and we're going to save it to our desktop. And now that has been created as a Word document. I'm going to jump over to my desktop and pull this up in Word so that you can see it. Now this will work in any word processor. There we go. And you can see it's the correct size that I was looking for and everything that we have in place, like putting the melody here, putting the psalm tones. That has been included and exported as images. And now you can go in and modify it as you go. So maybe you want to have some kind of introductory text that you put in here, or maybe you have a full page. You can do a complete page break and align it in that way. Maybe you just see here that you've got the invocation separated, and you say, you know, that's probably not appropriate. We're going to go ahead and add a line break or page break there and keep that combined. And now you see that here service of the word and intro it is split, so you can break that there. Maybe you add some nice liturgical artwork in there. I recommend against clip art, but that's just my personal preference. I know many churches still do it. There's some very good sound clip art that are out there that is not hokey. That's always a good way of going too. So now you can go through and modify this as you see fit. You can also change some of this as you go. So if you say, I'm just going to pick out this paragraph, say I want to remove verses 7 through 10. And you can say, okay, Ezekiel 1 through 6, and now 11 through 14. You can type that in there and override that. That's not going to change anything back here in your service because it's just on the exported document. But you have that luxury here, and there's many, many different changes you can make as you go through. Now, one thing you can't do within Word is change this hymn to include the melody. That has to be done in Lutheran Service Builder. And so you have to pick and choose where you want to make your modifications. And again, we understand that every church has different preferences on modifications, which means we can't predict it. And so that's why we give you this flexibility. All right, so in the interest of time, I'm going to move on. But if you have any questions about that, go ahead and submit them in the chat. The other thing that you can do here is you can go into presentation mode, which if you have screens in your congregation, or maybe you are recording a video for shut-ins and you want this overlaid during that time, there's all sorts of different uses for it. You can do the same kind of process here, except now your export is to a single screen. And some of it is easier to read than others, just due to its very nature. Now you've got different theme styles here. We're going to go with the basic. I created when we were in Epiphany, an Epiphany green, which included, at the time we had a background image, you could do that as well. We're just going to go with the LSB basic with the white background because it's a little bit easier to show up on here with the different contrast. Although I do recommend, based on your presentation space, usually black background with lighter text goes better. I find that on computer screens it's a little bit harder to read, but in a big screen that's easier. But that's, again, your choice as you go through here. So we're going to go with the basic, and you can see as you go through you can make these changes and say, okay, here's our hymn of invocation. Now, I may want to have the title be on all slides. So you see here, 1, 3, 4, there are my different stanzas. Everything is in there. You may say, well, you really only need the title on the first. And so here's the title. This one doesn't have it. This one doesn't have it. You may say, okay, for presentation, we're just going with text. And as you do that, now that entire hymn changes. You can also go and modify the stanzas here and say, oh, give me back stanza 2. And now that slide has been added here. Now, rubrics are going to be put on their own slide. Each rubric is separate. That's your call on whether you want to include that or not. It's a personal preference. If you exclude the text on some of these, you're removing all of that. And so that's not the best way to go. There's really not too much that you can do here. If you've got the hymn, you have the option for the captions. Sometimes if there's text that can't be modified, nothing will happen when you click on it. So you've got a lot of different options there as you go, but some of the stuff may be best left for modifying in PowerPoint. And we'll look at that in just a second. I forgot to mention the layout. You have layout here where you can affect things like margins or your slide size, depending on your screen resolution. So we're going to add some additional margins here. The default is a little bit too thin for me. When I go in here now, it's a little bit better. It gives me some more breathing room around the sides. That's my personal preference. You may have a different preference. And then that's really all that it is. But then from here you can go to Save As, and save as a PowerPoint. And we're going to then go, and I've got a quick shortcut to open files on my desktop. So I'm going to pull open that so you can see what it's like. And again, just like your service folder in Word, you can go through here and change it. It's now exported and put in a form that you can modify yourself. Some things can't be modified. You can't just go and make this have the melody again because it's already been exported. That's a builder functionality. But let's say maybe you don't want stand to be on separate page. I mean, we're at 113 slides. That's a lot of slides. You could go in and cut that, put it here, and maybe change that to red, and then you can delete this slide. One slight modification, obviously as you go, there's going to be a lot of different things that you'd have to do with that. That could take some time, and that's where I encourage you to learn more about the different themes that you have and the formats, where you could remove some of these. And I can show you here under service formats, you've got a number of different options as you go. That's for a different time. This is just an overview. So I'm almost at 50 minutes. I've got one more thing that I want to cover before we go. So let me switch back to my presentation. We're going to talk about copyright management because that's an important issue. It's an important feature, a time-saving feature in Lutheran Service Builder. So well, what about copyright management? What happened before Builder? Well, before Builder, the most common way of building a service folder was to just type it out in a word processor. Maybe that was Word, or Publisher is a very common one. WordPerfect back in the late 90s, early 2000s was very common. It's still common in some churches today. So you would just type out the service outline, and usually you would use the hymnal with it. So you would point people to the hymn in the hymnal, and that really wasn't a issue. You purchased the hymnals, you had the legal right to use them during worship. There wasn't really copyright management. Well, when we introduced Lutheran Service Builder, we both introduced a problem and a solution. So the problem was we now allow churches easy access to print copyrighted material, which is generally a big no-no. You won't want to have people printed copyright material. I mean, that's the exact meaning of the word copyright, is you do or do not have the right to copy this. Well, we've now given people access to it, but now that we've done that, we've provided a solution as well, and that is that Lutheran Service Builder provides automatic reporting of the copyrights. So what it'll do, and this goes back, and we'll go back into Builder real quick, is that it will track your usage of these hymns. As soon as you export, it says this hymn has been used. And if there is a copyright holder of that hymn, then we pay the appropriate royalties to that copyright holder. And we renegotiated all of our contracts to fit this so that it becomes in a pool as opposed to a different price per hymn. Now, the way that you can use this is through the purchase of a hymn license, which the vast majority of our customers have. And that's why I'm talking about this is as if you have that, because most of our churches do. And you can see down here that, like in this case, it's public domain. Let's see what that is. So the copyright information for the text is public domain, but the melody is not. It's from John Ireland. And so it's copyright the John Ireland Trust. So if you, if you export this and you have a hymn license, which shows here, it's going to be really tough for you to see, so if you can't see it, just trust me. The bottom, it gives a hymn license and a number that says this church has the right to print this, and then we'll take care of providing the royalty checks to the John Ireland Trust. This makes it very simple so that you don't even have to think about it. The Lutheran Service Builder does it all in the background. What this also allows you to do is access statistics on the usage of your hymn. So we get those statistics, you get those statistics. This view is really not exciting right now. You've got a couple of different things that you can view, but in the life of a real church, not a demo church like I'm displaying here, you would see a bunch of ups and downs of different hymn usages. So going back to my presentation, statistics are available to you, but more so, why is this important to even think about? Like, why did we put such an emphasis on it? Well, it really comes down to a seventh commandment issue, in that intellectual copyrights and intellectual property, if you use that in a way that is not allowed, you are really stealing. And we want to do everything we can to prevent that from occurring, both from a legal standpoint, but also from a conscious standpoint. We don't want to make it easy for our brothers and sisters to fall into sin. So when you are using illegally copyrighted material, that's a seventh commandment issue, and so we are making it so that you don't fall into that when you use Lutheran Service Builder. Lastly, and this is also very important, it provides compensation to our copyright holders so that we can continue to have these wonderful musicians and writers who are providing beautiful music and beautiful words to be used in worship for our church. It's not a lucrative business, and if you know anybody who has ever published music, you know that it's just like many other art forms. It is done for the beauty of presenting it, for the purpose of praising God, not so that people can get rich. And so anything we can do to support them and help provide those royalties, it allows them to continue to produce music for worship. And so those are, I think, more than anything, the first one is reason enough, but that's, if you need an additional reason, supporting our artists is a good way to go. So that's enough on my spiel for copyright management. I'm already over my time, but I still have about 5 minutes for questions, and we don't have too many of them. So before we get to the questions, I do want to just highlight that if you have not used Lutheran Service Builder yet or considering reintroducing it to your congregation, you can download a free trial today at lutheranservicebuilder.com. If you'd like to speak to me or one of our software consultants, there's our contact information on the screen. Email is the best way to get a hold of me. Otherwise, you can call my office number there, which is listed. Otherwise, a software consultant can be reached through our sales email or through that 800 number there, and they'll be happy to walk you through some of the details of how to introduce it to your church. But I hope that through the information provided, you have a better idea of how Lutheran Service Builder can help your church, or if you're already using it, how you can help your church by knowing the features a little bit better. I know it was an overview training, and there's so much we didn't cover, but this is the main features. These are the main things that you would use to really get a service into a usable format through print or presentation. So with that, I'm going to move on to my question and answers. And I don't have too many, and I'm going to reiterate. The first two I've already answered, but I do want to reiterate it. The first one is, when can I use it on my Mac? And this goes back to what we're moving to with the online version of Lutheran Service Builder. So I said I was going to draw some attention to this. I want to jump back to lutherancalendar.org. lutherancalendar.org, where you have this church year calendar, is actually going to serve as the basis for the online version of Lutheran Service Builder. And so what you saw before in our calendar view in Lutheran Service Builder 2.0, the current version, is going to shift, and it's going to become this kind of view where you can start off by exploring the church year and exploring the different aspects of the calendar, and from here you'll be able to plan your service or start a free trial. So that's going to be where you go later on, and then we'll shift Lutheran Service Builder to point to that. But for right now, it's just a great free resource, and this part of it will always be a free resource. We're not going to charge to access the propers here. But to plan the service, then that'll lead you into Lutheran Service Builder online. So that is the very brief preview, and we are getting farther and farther along every day. We'll have more previews available as the year goes on. But that also leads very nicely into my next question, which Amy asked, what are the propers? And that's something that's for many of our non-trained church office workers, those who did not go through one of our synodical schools. It's probably an unfamiliar phrase. So you'll see here the propers are the different aspects of the worship service that are assigned for that given day in the church year. And in most cases that's going to be on a Sunday, but you'll have plenty of other days that may be observed on a different day. Like, for example, Matthias the Apostle is on February 24th. Well, that was a Friday. You're probably not going to have a special service for Matthias, but there are propers assigned for that day in the church year. And so you can see as you go through, there's the Old Testament reading, the Psalm, Acts, where they talk about the casting of lots and how the lot fell on Matthias to replace Judas as the 12th apostle. There's other gospel readings, the introit, the collect. So if you are going to observe Matthias on that Sunday, either before or after that, you could get the propers and build the service around that. So these are the propers. Like I mentioned before, the hymn of the day can also be considered a proper, although that isn't displayed here on Lutheran calendar. It is considered a proper, and Lutheran Service Builder accounts for that. If you'd like to learn more about the church year, I recommend signing up for our free blog called Today in the Church Year. And it goes through the different feasts and festivals and commemorations, and will provide the scripture links, scripture reading references, and also a link to the propers for the day on Lutheran calendar, and a devotional content pulled from one of our many great resources. In this case, there's also a hymn available. And our Deaconess Anna Johnson, who works here with me, she compiles that and works with our team to provide this on a regular basis on each appropriate day of the church year. This has been a blessing to many people. I highly encourage you to sign up for this thing, and it's free. So it's just to help provide some additional education on the church year. Okay, so that was the next question. The last one I have in here right now. Dave asked, how do you set things up to print properly double-sided multiple pages, like a book? Well, Dave, that will depend on what tool you're using. If you're using Microsoft Word, not a Lutheran product, but a very common product within Lutheran churches, that would be within your print settings. And depending on your version of Microsoft Word, it may look a little bit different. But if you go up into File and then Print, and it's been a little while since I've done this, so hopefully I remember. Sometimes Microsoft Word kind of stalls out on me. So you can go here into Page Setup, and you can choose, so like here, multiple pages. This is a book fold. You could also do like 2 pages per sheet or mirror margins. The book fold is the way to do that. And you could change other things here. But when you click OK, you can see that it's printing out in this way. And if you print this, it should change. Now, there's plenty of help articles online. Sorry, my toolbar keeps coming up. So yeah, it shows it in the order of the pages, but actually, let's print it to a PDF. Oops, I didn't mean to click on that. If I print it to a PDF, I think it'll show it in that book format. Let's see, here we go. I have to save it. And then it should display for me as soon as it's done. It's going to take a second. Printing to PDF always does take a second, but if I print it to paper, that's not going to be much help for you. So as you go down here, you'll see now we're in book format, and you've got these different pages. And so page 2 is where we have the hymn start, and then as you go through, you'll have some blank pages. If you print this out and you print it double-sided, when you fold it, it will be accurate. Now there's other things you can do that will help you distinguish how that's being applied, and one of those things would be adding a inserting page numbers. And here we go, bottom of the page, insert page on the left-hand side. That's one way to do it, and you can see that there. And so then when you print it to a PDF, you'd see those different ones like a book. Publisher does many of the same things, although we do not export directly to Publisher. We do export, or Publisher has an import of a docx file, which is what this is, or a doc file, sorry. The doc is the older version that's compatible with more versions of Windows, or with Word. So that's one way to do that. There's a number of other programs that provide that booklet printing, but this is the simplest way to get there. So Dave, I hope that answered your question. We are already past 11 o'clock, and I don't have any more questions in the queue, so I'm going to wrap up for today. Once again, thank you for attending. I really appreciate you being here. I hope this was helpful to you. I hope that you learned a little bit more about Lutheran Service Builder and how to get started. If you want to learn more, I recommend going to lutheranservicebuilder.com and then clicking on the training in the navigation there, and that'll give you access to our 4 training webinars that I recorded last month. Those really go in more in depth and would provide you with some additional details. But with that, I'm going to wrap up and say once more thank you for attending and have a great rest of the day. Bye.